sheet. Does everybody have a sheet? Everybody have a sheet? Everybody that wants one at least. We are going to start in Joshua tonight. The book of Joshua, now if you remember leading up to the book of Joshua, we have gotten through Deuteronomy, right? And the last thing we saw in Deuteronomy was what? The death of Moses, right? So Moses is gone. Moses has been a leader for the Israelites through the Exodus, through leaving the Egyptians, and then wandering into the wilderness. Now they had seen earlier. They had seen the promised land, and Moses, remember, sent 12 spies out. And they came back. 10 of them had a bad report. 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, had a great report. Yes, this is the land that God has given us. Let's go take it. And yet those 10 said, no, the people over there make us look like grasshoppers. And it's flowing with milk and honey. It's a good land, but we can't take it. Because of their doubt and their disobedience, God allowed them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. A whole generation of people, Israelites, died out, and a new generation has come on the scene. Moses was shown the promised land by God. Remember, Moses struck the rock when God told him to speak to the rock, and because of that, because God is serious about obedience, and but God told Moses, hey, Moses, because you disobeyed, you will not enter into the promised land. But God allowed Moses to see the promised land, and Moses, through God's leadership, has passed the baton, if you will, and called a new leader. And his name is Joshua. And Joshua is actually the one who leads the Israelites into the promised land. Okay? And so it's a great book and great study. But the book of Joshua begins a series of 12 books that goes from Joshua to Esther, called the historical books. I think this is where your notes begin. Is that right, Coop? Is that where your notes begin? So this is the historical books. They cover the life of Joshua, the conquest of Canaan, where the tribes of Israel would settle, the judges, the kings of Israel, the divided kingdom, the rivalry between the northern and southern kingdoms, until the fall of the southern kingdom to Nebuchadnezzar's armies, which brought an end to Israel's freedom at the time. A couple of things that we know about Joshua. Joshua was born in slavery, in Egyptian slavery, okay? Anybody know his father's name? None. Yeah. Boy, don't your parents think a whole lot of you? What do you think? What do we think about calling him? None. Okay, there you go. Easy to spell, N-U-N. His father's name was Nun, and he was from the tribe of Ephraim. Now, we don't know anything about Joshua's mother, okay? And so that's one of the things that we don't know about. But the name Joshua means Jehovah is salvation. Joshua is one of the spies who came back with a good report from the promised land after spying it out. And as a result of the faith of Joshua and Caleb, the other who came back with a good report, they were allowed to enter the promised land. There were only, check this out, they were the only 2 survivors of the original 600,000 adult men that left Egypt. Only 2 survived to go into the promised land. Isn't that remarkable? What's that? 40 years. Do you remember what Numbers was called? It was the world's longest death march. Y'all remember that? 40 years, 600,000 people, 600,000 men, and only 2 survivors, and that was Joshua and Caleb. Rest of them died in the wilderness. Their children were left to enter the promised land. The book of Joshua can be divided into 3 sections. We kind of have done that with this study. The first section is the crossing of the Jordan. Okay? We find this in chapters 1 through 5 about the crossing of the Jordan. So Israel has finished mourning for Moses. How long did they mourn for Moses? You may remember? 30 days. 30 days, okay? Israel has finished mourning for Moses, and God speaks to Joshua concerning his duties as the new leader of the Israelites. And as God has been with Moses, he promises that he'll be with Joshua. And in Joshua chapter 1, verses 3 through 9, God gives Joshua 3 promises. And can I tell you tonight that God has promised these 3 things to us as well, okay? And that is this: I have given you the land. Now, how do we claim that promise, if you will, tonight? What's that? Well, yeah, we can take. But I'm here. How do we do it? I think we do it by sharing the gospel, for one thing, right? Not that everybody that we share with is going to trust Jesus and be saved, but the promise is that if we share, there will be a work done in their life, right? You can't, if the Word of God never returns void, that means every time you share it, God is working, okay? And so the promise is to Joshua, I have given you the land. In verse 5, again, another promise that God makes to us: he'll never leave us or forsake us. What a great promise. He will never leave us nor forsake us. There's not a valley that you could go through that God's not right beside you, and even living inside of you as you walk through it. And then, because of that, I will be with you wherever you go, is what he tells Joshua. If you remember, though, God tells Joshua, do not fear. Do not fear. He tells him that several times. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. Because Joshua has seen Moses lead, right? And there's probably, now that Moses is died and Joshua is the new leader of these guys, of this people, I'm sure there's just a little bit of anxiety, right? A little bit of nervousness. And so God is saying, Joshua, listen, you are incapable. You are incapable of doing this on your own. But I've given you this land. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. And I'm with you wherever you go. Because of that promise, don't be afraid. When God tells us not to be afraid, it's not because we're depending on our own strength. It's because we are to depend on his, right? And so that's what God is telling Joshua. So as busy as he is, Joshua takes the time to read and think about the Word of God. And this was a secret to his success. Let me read to you Joshua chapter 1, verse number 8. This is what the Lord tells Joshua, okay? This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Listen, there is power in the Word of God. The secret to success for Joshua was to stay plugged into God, stay connected with God through the law, through the reading, the meditation of his Word. Okay? Chapter 2 begins with the account of the conversion of the harlot Rahab and the conquering of Jericho, even though we don't see it happen really until chapter number 6. Okay? But here's something that's interesting about Jericho. We'll kind of go ahead and talk about this instead of waiting until chapter 6 to talk about this. And you'll hopefully you'll see this when we get to Israel, for those of us who are going. Archaeologists tell us that Jericho had 2 walls around it, an inner wall and an outer wall. Okay? The inner wall was about 12 feet thick, the outer wall about 6 feet thick, and both walls stood about 30 feet high. And excavations, they show that they were discovered to have been destroyed by falling down flat, just as the Bible has said. Now here's what's interesting about that, okay? When they fell, they did not fall stone on stone, straight down, okay? They didn't even fall inward. Now, why would they not fall inward? Because that could be described by people that an outside force pushed the walls down. Okay, and yet that's not what the Bible says happened. These walls have been discovered have fallen outward, as if some force was on the inside pushing the walls out. Isn't that remarkable? It's exactly the way God describes it. Fell down flat and pushed from the inside out. It is a remarkable discovery. And the reason why this happened was because God wanted to show for generations what he had done. And only God could do that. So Joshua is talking about, knows that he's got to defeat Jericho. And so he sends 2 spies to scout out Jericho. And there's a harlot there by the name of Rahab who showed that she believed in Jehovah God by giving God credit for the work in the past. And she confesses him as the one true God. And Rahab proves to be very unselfish. She shows concern for her family, and she wants them to be safe as well. And to keep her family safe, the spies tell her that once the battle begins, she's to have a scarlet cord in the window as a sign as to which home was hers, and she is to keep her family in the house. Now, what's interesting about Rahab is her occupation, I guess, is the best way to explain it. She was a prostitute. Okay, Bible says harlot, depending on what translation. But just to show how redeeming our God is, if you turn over to Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, do you know who is in the lineage of Jesus? This prostitute. Isn't that something? Our God is a redeeming God. Okay? There's nothing that you could do that is so great that grace can't overtake it. Isn't that amazing? And so we see that God's grace is certainly greater than all of our sin. Chapters 3 through 5 deal with the crossing of the Jordan River. God gives the Israelites a sign to show it that it's him who's leading the people into the promised land. That sign was, does anybody remember what it was? The sign was, what's that? That's right. The sign was, again, God parts some waters, but something has to happen in order for the waters to part, the Jordan River. Anybody remember? That's right. The priest's feet must step into the water. What an act of faith, right? I mean, they're not standing on the bank saying, okay, God, do it, right? God says, you take the step first and you'll see my work. And so when the feet of the priest step into the Jordan River, the river will stand in a heap. And it wouldn't happen before they placed their feet in the Jordan, but only when they placed their feet in the Jordan River would they see the parting of the water. When they get to the other side, they are told to set up piles of stones. Two piles are built, one by the 12 chosen men on the bank of the river, and the other by Joshua in the middle of the river. Now, the ones that were set up, on the bank of the river, they are told to set those up as a memorial, right? Obviously, when Joshua put them in the river as well, but those on the bank would be used as a memorial so that when people say, hey, what are these rocks for? They are a testimony of God's goodness. I heard a preacher preach on memorial stones. Like, what are we leaving our kids? to show them that God has been faithful to us, that God is true to his promises. It's an incredible thought, but that's why they set those there. Chapter 5, we're going to breeze through this quickly because chapter 5 deals with the mark of the covenant, not the ark of the covenant. Okay? Anybody know what the mark of the covenant is? Circumcision. That's all we need to talk about. No details given, nothing like that. God commands them to receive it when they get on the other side, and we call that the mark of the covenant, not the ark of the covenant, okay? So that's chapters 1 through 5, the crossing of the Jordan River. When we get to chapter 6, we begin another section of the conquering of the land, okay? Conquering of the land. Chapter 6 deals with the conquering of Jericho and completes the story of Rahab. Chapter 7 and 8 record the fall of the city Ai, which is spelt just like it sounds, A-I. And there's a lesson in discipline learned by the Israelites in the Ai experience. Do y'all remember what happened? There was one soldier by the name of Achan, who they was commanded, hey, we're going to utterly destroy everything, and he kept some of the goods back, right? And the Israelites were defeated because of their disobedience. And so here are the things that Achan took. We read about in Joshua chapter 7 and verse 21. He took a Babylonian garment. He took 200 shekels of silver and a wedge of gold weighing about 50 shekels. Now, because of what seemingly was a small amount, because of that, there were people who were killed and their families were destroyed because of that, because of one man's sin. Because of one man's sin. Never think that our sin doesn't have consequences and doesn't affect other people. It absolutely does. Well, not only those that were those Israelites that were destroyed when they were fought and they were overtaken by the people of Ai, but also Achan's family was destroyed. The Bible says that everybody in Achan's family was destroyed because of his disobedience. All of Israel learns a lesson from Achan's sin. Really, there's two lessons. Number one, the nation's success in overcoming the Canaanites is a result of absolute obedience to God. And number two, God will deal with sin. And so that's what he does. In chapters 9 through 12, we see the record of the victories of Joshua and the Israelites in conquering the land. Altogether, Joshua conquered 33 Canaanite cities. I've got a map up there, I think is the next slide, Coop, I believe. Is that right? Yep. Can y'all kind of sort of see this? This was the way that Joshua kind of conquered the land. Number one, he started in the center. You've got Jericho there and Ai there and all those kind of cities. Once he conquered the central part, he headed down south. Okay. Once he conquered those cities, then they followed the Jordan River up towards the Sea of Galilee, and they destroyed the northern part, including one of the cities that was burned. A city that we'll visit if you're on that trip to Israel, the city of Hazor. And the last time that Tasha and I were there in 2022, you could still see the soot. Isn't that remarkable? Still see it there on the buildings. And if you took your foot and kind of kicked along the wall or kind of scraped the ground, you could find some artifacts, including small fragments of human bone. Okay? That's the city of Hazor. Now, why would Joshua, why would he conquer this land in this way? Anybody know? What's that? Well, yeah, he was told to. Y'all ever heard the saying "conquer and divide"? Or divide and conquer. I got it backwards. Divide and conquer. That's what Joshua has done. Obviously, the Lord led him through the central part. But if you look at that map, he pretty much divided the north and the south part of Canaan. And then he started conquering, right? And as he headed south, if the people of the Canaanites were going to get help, the people from the north were going to have to travel a pretty good ways to get some help. And so that's what he did. He divided them and then conquered. If it had started at the south or at the north, those in the central part would have been able to get to him a little quicker. So he divided and conquered. But his strategy was not only to divide the land, where he was only fighting one section at a time, but it was also to set up high in the mountains to have a clear view of the people that he was battling. And so that's why he did what he did. But it's a remarkable strategy and a pretty neat study when you begin to look at those cities that he conquered. And then the third section of the book of Joshua is chapters 13 through 24. In this section, the division of the territory of Canaan west of the Jordan River is made among the remaining 9.5 tribes. Remember, there was a request from the tribes of Reuben and Gad and a half tribe of Manasseh who wanted to settle on the east side of the Jordan. Y'all remember that? And Joshua told them, hey, if y'all come help us conquer, then yeah, we'll let you come back. That's fine, not a problem. And so you got 9.5 tribes that settled on the west side, 2.5 tribes that settled on the east side. Excuse me. However, the Levites didn't receive any tribal inheritance as far as sections of land are concerned. Instead, they received cities to live in and common land rather for livestock. This plan scatters out the Levites. It scatters out the priest among the tribes so they can better serve the people. Okay, you got to think about it. Can you go back to that map real quick, Coop? If they were to settle, let's say they were to settle in the southern part of Israel, of Canaan over here on the west side, if they were to settle there, they couldn't serve the people in the north, could they? Right? So they weren't given land. All of this was strategic by the Lord and followed through with Joshua. It was strategic. The Levites, the priests, were there to serve the people and be spokespeople for the Lord. And so they were given certain cities and common land for livestock so that they could better serve the other tribes. In chapters 23 and 24, that brings us to the end of Joshua's life. He calls a meeting of the leaders of the people to give his farewell address. The main theme of this speech was a warning against idolatry. Remember, the next book that we will study is the book of Judges. And the book of Judges, the end of it, if you remember, there is a phrase at the end of it where it's recorded that everybody did what was right in their own eyes because there was no king. Well, part of the reason for that is because Joshua warned the Israelites, do not intermarry because they will, with the Canaanites, they will bring their pagan gods with them. And guess what happened? They intermarried and the Canaanites brought their pagan gods with them. But Joshua was warning them against idolatry. Okay? But they don't listen. The pagan worship of the Canaanites includes immoral practices, and the latter history of the Israelites shows that they take on some of these practices, which results in God's judgment to them as a nation. Joshua chapter 24, verse 15 is a very, very common, a very familiar verse. It's where Joshua is meeting with his people, and he says, hey, listen, essentially, this is Brother Dustin's paraphrase, God has been good to us, but you've got to make a choice yourself. Are you going to follow the God of the people of this land? Are you going to follow the God of your forefathers? You're going to follow the one true God. And then he makes this declaration that, man, it's so powerful. We've got it in our house. We've got we got it painted on a big piece of wood that hangs in our living room, where Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. That is where Joshua makes this declaration of him remaining faithful to the Lord. The meeting closes with the covenant between the people and Joshua, in which the people promised to serve the God of Israel. Obviously, they don't keep that to its totality. And then soon after the meeting, Joshua dies, and he dies at the age of 110. How would you like, for 55 years old, you'd be in the midlife crisis at 55 years old? How'd you like that? Doesn't sound too good to me. I'm 50. But anyway, he dies at 110 years old, and then we will move into the book of Judges in a couple of weeks. Because next week we have our business meeting, okay? Are there any questions about the book of Joshua? Hey, let me kind of tell you about our business meeting next week. We do have some important stuff to discuss, some very important stuff to discuss. Do not miss next week's business meeting. It's all good stuff, but it's stuff that we need to discuss, and so you'll want to be here for that. We'll try to remind people of that on Sunday as well, because it is a pretty important business meeting, okay? But if there are no other questions, all right. Somebody's geared up, I know. Anybody want to dismiss us in prayer? Somebody was geared up. Come on, don't disappoint. All right, go ahead, Wes.